I am Carter. I'm 34 years old, and last week, I destroyed my own family. I didn't use a weapon and I didn't throw a single punch. All I used was a signature and a cell phone. But before I tell you about the silence, that deafening, beautiful silence of an empty wedding hall, I want to know who is listening to this. Where are you guys watching from? Let me know in the comments below. It helps me feel a little less alone in all of this. It started at Le Jardin, one of those French places downtown where the menus don't have prices and the waiters look at you like you're trespassing if your tie isn't silk. I was sitting across from my parents, Joyce and Jeffrey, and my younger brother, Brendan. The table was covered in white linen, heavy silverware, and an empty bottle of Pinot Noir that cost more than my first car. I paid for that wine, just like I paid for the appetizers, the entrees, and the suit Brendan was wearing. The air at the table was so thick you could choke on it. My mother, Joyce, was dabbing the corner of her mouth with a napkin, her eyes darting around the room to see who was watching us. That's her thing. Appearance is her currency. My father, Jeffrey, was staring into his glass, avoiding my gaze. And Brendan? He was grinning, checking his reflection in the back of a spoon. So, I said, breaking the silence. I kept my voice steady, though my stomach was twisting into knots. We need to finalize the seating chart for the reception. The coordinator needs it by Friday. Brendan waved a hand dismissively. Relax, Carter. We have time. Besides, Sarah's mom wants to make a few changes to the head table. Sarah was his fiancée, a sweet girl from old money, a family that owned half the real estate in the county. Brendan had somehow convinced them he was a high-flying attorney on the partner track, not a guy who barely passed the bar and was currently between firms. We don't have time, Brendan, I said, tapping the leather folder next to my plate. And speaking of the head table, I put myself next to Aunt Sylvia. I figure that's out of the way enough so I'm not in the main photos, but close enough to handle any vendor issues. My mother froze. She put her fork down slowly. The clink of silver against china sounded like a gunshot in the quiet restaurant. She looked at my father. He didn't look up. He just swirled his wine. Carter, Mom said. Her voice was soft, that dangerous kind of soft she used right before she gutted you. That's actually what we wanted to discuss with you tonight. I felt a cold prickle run down my neck. What is? The wedding, she said. She reached out and patted my hand. Her skin felt dry and cold. It's going to be a very specific crowd. Sarah's family, their friends. Senators, judges, people of significant influence. I know, Mom. That's why I hired the extra security you asked for. No, honey, you're not listening, she said, withdrawing her hand. She straightened her posture. It's about the image, the brand of the two families merging. She took a breath and then she delivered the blow. We think it would be best if you didn't attend the wedding. I blinked. The noise of the restaurant, the clatter of dishes, the low hum of conversation, seemed to drop away. Excuse me, it's just, you know how you are, Brendan chimed in, leaning forward. You're a logistics guy, Carter. You work in warehouses. You have that rough look, calloused hands. You don't fit the vibe. Sarah's dad asked about you last week. Asked if you were the help. It was humiliating. The help, I repeated. My voice sounded hollow. It's not a punishment. My father finally spoke up, though he still wouldn't look me in the eye. It's damage control. Your presence. It feels heavy. It would ruin the flow. We want Brendan's day to be perfect. You understand, right? You've always been the practical one. So, I said, looking at each of them, to be clear, you want me to pay for the wedding. You want me to organize the logistics, but you don't want me to be there. We'll tell people you were called away on urgent business, Mom said brightly, as if she had solved a puzzle. Overseas. It sounds impressive. Much better than the truth. And the truth is? I asked. That you're just not one of us, Brendan said. He smirked. It was a small, quick thing, but I saw it. You're the workhorse, Carter. I'm the show pony. Everyone has their role. I looked at the bill sitting on the edge of the table. $400 for lunch. $60,000 committed to the wedding. 5 years of my life pouring money into their bottomless pit of debt. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet, like a wire finally giving way under too much tension. "I see," I said. I reached into my jacket pocket. My mother watched me, expecting, I assume, a check for the tip. Or maybe the final vendor deposits I had brought with me. Instead, I pulled out my car keys. "You're right," I said. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, drawing a few looks from nearby tables. "I don't fit in here. I should go." "Sit down, Carter. Don't make a scene," Mom hissed, her smile tight and fake for the benefit of the room. "We haven't ordered dessert." "Enjoy the creme brulee," I said. "And Brendan, you're right. Everyone has their role. I think I'm done with mine." I dropped a heavy cream envelope on the table. It wasn't money. It was the stack of unpaid invoices for the florist, the caterer, and the venue that were due to be paid the next morning. "What's this?" Brendan asked, reaching for it. "Paperwork," I said. "You're a lawyer. Figure it out." I turned and walked away. I walked past the host stand, out the heavy oak doors, and into the cool night air. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from a sudden, terrifying sense of freedom. I got into my truck, my reliable, 10-year-old Ford that Brendan called a redneck mobile, and I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "Stay away," they had said. "Okay," I whispered to the empty cab. Challenge accepted. To understand why that moment at the restaurant was the end of the world for my family, you have to understand the history. You have to understand that I wasn't just a brother or a son. I was the bank. I was the safety net. I was the guy who cleaned up the vomit so they could pretend they never got sick. 5 years ago, I was living in Chicago. I had a great job as a supply chain manager for a major medical logistics company. I had a condo with a view of the lake. I had a life. Then the call came. It was my mother. She was hysterical. "It's the store, Carter. Dad's sick, and the bank is threatening to foreclose. We're going to lose everything. The house, the business, your grandfather's legacy. Please." My father ran a hardware supply store in our hometown. It had been in the family for 2 generations. Brendan was in law school at the time, racking up student loans and partying on weekends, shielded from the reality of the family finances. So I did what the good son does. I sold my condo. I liquidated my 401k. I moved back home to a town I had spent 18 years trying to escape. When I walked into that store, it was a graveyard. Inventory was a mess. Vendors hadn't been paid in months, and my father was sitting in the back office, staring at a wall of red numbers. He wasn't just sick physically, he was sick with pride. He refused to admit he had failed. I took over. I put $150,000 of my own money, my entire life savings, into that business. I worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. I drove the delivery trucks when the drivers quit. I restocked shelves at 2 a.m. I negotiated with suppliers who were ready to sue us. For 3 years, I didn't take a salary. I lived in the room above the garage at my parents' house. And Brendan would come home on holidays in a leased BMW, complaining about how hard law school exams were. "You look tired, Carter," he'd say, patting me on the shoulder with a hand that had never held anything heavier than a textbook. "You should really take care of yourself. Maybe get a facial. You're aging fast." Mom would beam at him. "He's studying so hard. He's going to be a litigator, a partner." They looked at him and saw their future, the prestige, the country club memberships, the restoration of the Ellis name. They looked at me and saw the mechanic who kept the engine running so they could enjoy the ride. By the time the business turned a profit again, I was 32. I looked 40. My hands were rough. My back ached when it rained. But I had saved them. I expected a thank you, maybe a partnership offer. Instead, at the victory dinner celebrating the store's solvency, Dad raised a glass. "To Brendan," he said, "whose legal advice really helped us navigate those contracts." Brendan hadn't read a single contract. I had hired an external lawyer because Brendan was too busy with his fraternity mixer. But I sat there and clapped. I swallowed my pride because that's what I was trained to do. Then came Sarah. Sarah was the jackpot. When Brendan brought her home, I saw the dollar signs light up in my mother's eyes. Sarah was sweet, genuinely kind, but she was sheltered. She had no idea that the successful family business Brendan bragged about was only standing because I was holding up the walls with my bare hands. "She's the one," Brendan told me one night, drunk on expensive scotch he'd charged to the company card. "Her dad is a Senator Carter. Do you know what that means for my career? I just need to seal the deal." "Does she know you're currently unemployed?" I asked. He had failed the bar exam the first time and was studying for the second, living off an allowance from the store's accounts. "Details," he waved a hand. "Once we're married, her dad will get me into a top firm. It's all about connections. That's why this wedding has to be perfect. It's an investment. And that's how I got roped into paying for it. Mom sat me down 6 months ago. We need this, Carter. For the family. If Brendan marries Sarah, we're all set for life. But we have to match their level. We can't look poor. We need you to handle the finances. Just until Brendan gets his signing bonus." There was no signing bonus. I knew that, but I agreed. I set a budget of $30,000. It was a fortune, but I could manage it if we were careful. I was a fool. Within a month, the budget was blown. Brendan didn't want a DJ. He wanted a string quartet for the ceremony and a 12-piece jazz band for the reception. He didn't want the local country club. He wanted the Grandview Estate, a venue that cost $15,000 just to open the doors. Every time I tried to say no, Mom would guilt-trip me. "Don't be jealous, Carter. Just because you don't have anyone doesn't mean you should punish your brother." Jealous? I wasn't jealous. I was exhausted. I was watching my bank account drain away for a party celebrating a lie. But the real turning point, the moment the burden became too heavy to carry, was the suit fitting. 2 weeks before that dinner at Le Jardin, we went to a high-end tailor in the city. Brendan was getting a custom tuxedo. Mom insisted I come along to handle the payment. While Brendan stood on the podium, being measured by 2 assistants, I sat in the waiting area, checking emails on my phone. The tailor, a snooty man with a tape measure around his neck, walked over to me. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "The driver's waiting area is actually around the back. We like to keep the showroom for clients." I looked up, stunned. I was wearing my work clothes, jeans, and a polo shirt with the hardware store logo. Before I could correct him, Brendan laughed from the podium. "It's okay, Marco. He's with me. He's handling the logistics." He didn't call me his brother. He didn't say I was the one paying the $3,000 bill for the suit he was wearing. He let the tailor think I was the help. I looked at Brendan in the mirror. He winked at me. That was the moment the seed was planted. The realization that no matter how much I gave, no matter how much I sacrificed, I would never be sitting at the table. I would always be the one serving the food. So when they told me to stay away at dinner, they thought they were banishing me. They didn't realize they were setting me free. And they definitely didn't realize that without the help, the whole castle was built on sand. The days following the dinner were a blur of rage and calculation. I didn't answer their texts. I saw the notifications pop up on my screen. "Mom, stop being dramatic, Carter. We need the check for the florist." "Brendan, seriously, bro? The deposit is due. Don't ruin this." "Dad, call your mother. She's upset." She was upset? That was rich. I went to work at the store, but I stayed in the back office. I started moving things. Not boxes, but data. I began downloading financial records. I made copies of every transfer I had made into the business account, every personal check I had written to cover their mortgage, every credit card payment I had made for Brendan's lifestyle. I wasn't just leaving. I was preparing an audit. 3 days after the dinner, Brendan showed up at the store. He stormed into my office, slamming the door behind him. He looked frantic. His hair was messy, and for the first time, the golden child veneer was cracking. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. The caterer called. They said the payment bounced. "I canceled the check," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "I told you, I'm done. You can't do that." We have a contract. No, Brendan, I said, finally looking him in the eye. I have a contract. My name is on the agreement with the caterer. My name is on the venue booking. My name is on the florist order. I am the client, and I decided to cancel services I no longer require. He turned pale. Mom and Dad will kill you. Let them try, I said. By the way, how's the car situation? Brendan flinched. The car. The damn car. A week prior, Brendan had made his most insane demand yet. He didn't want a limo. He didn't want a standard luxury sedan. He demanded a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom. Specifically, a 1960s model in Old English white. It's iconic, Carter, he had argued. Imagine the photos. Me and Sarah rolling up in a Phantom. It screams old money. It screams $5,000 a day, I had countered. We don't have it. The budget is maxed out. Find it, he had snapped. Take it out of your retirement fund or something. You don't need retirement. You're going to work until you die anyway. I had booked the car. I had put a $2,000 non-refundable deposit on my personal American Express. Because I was weak. Because I wanted peace. I called the rental agency. I told him now, leaning back in my chair. I told them the event was canceled. They kept the deposit, but the balance? That's gone. No Phantom for you, little brother. You're jealous, he spat. You've always been jealous. You're a sad, lonely man who can't stand to see me succeed. Succeed? I laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Brendan, you're 31 years old. You're driving a car I pay for. You're marrying a woman you're lying to. You're not succeeding. You're performing. And the show just got canceled. He lunged across the desk. He grabbed my collar. Fix this, he hissed. You fix this right now or I swear to God. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was strong, years of lifting crates and moving pallets. He winced. Or what? I asked quietly. You'll sue me? With what money? You'll tell Dad? The man who can't balance a checkbook. I shoved him back. He stumbled, hitting the file cabinet. Get out of my office, I said. And tell Mom that if she wants flowers at the wedding, she better start picking them from the neighbor's garden. He left, but the war wasn't over. It was just escalating. That afternoon, I got a call from the venue manager, Mrs. Higgins. She sounded confused. Mr. Ellis, she said. I received your email about the cancellation, but your mother is here. She's screaming at my staff. She says you made a mistake and that the wedding is still on. The wedding might be on, Mrs. Higgins, I said, but the payment from me is off. Unless they gave you a new credit card. They said to put it on your tab, she said timidly. I don't have a tab anymore, I said. If they don't pay the full balance of $12,000 by close of business today, you release the date. Isn't that the contract? It is, she said. But follow the contract, Mrs. Higgins. I'm protecting you. If you host this event, you won't get paid. Trust me. I hung up. I knew my parents didn't have $12,000 liquid. They had assets, sure, but everything was leveraged. They were house poor and image rich. That night, I went to my apartment, the room above the garage. I started packing. Not just clothes. I packed my documents, my birth certificate, the deed to the truck. I heard them downstairs, screaming, things breaking. How could he do this? Mom was wailing. After everything we've done for him. He's ungrateful, Dad roared. I gave him a job when nobody else would. The delusion was impressive. Then, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. My door flew open. It was Dad. His face was purple with rage. You think you're smart? He shouted. You think you can hold us hostage? I'm just doing what you asked, I said calmly, folding a shirt. I'm staying away, and my money is staying with me. You're cut off, he yelled. You're fired. Get out of my house. Get out of my business. I quit 3 hours ago, I said. And as for the house, I looked around the cramped, dusty room. Don't worry. I'm leaving. If you walk out that door, he spat, pointing a shaking finger at me. Don't you ever come back. You're dead to us. You hear me? Dead. I zipped up my duffel bag. I looked at the man I had idolized as a child, the man I had saved from bankruptcy, the man who looked at me with nothing but contempt. Funny, I said, shouldering my bag. I was just thinking the same thing. I walked past him. I walked down the stairs, past my mother who was sobbing on the sofa, checking her phone between sobs, and out into the driveway. I threw my bag into the truck. I didn't look back. But as I drove away, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Nathan, my best friend and actual lawyer. Text from Nathan. You need to come to my office. Now, I found something in the public records regarding the store. And Carter, you're not going to like it. I thought I had hit rock bottom with my family. I thought the money was the main issue. I was wrong. The betrayal ran so much deeper than just a wedding budget. I drove straight to Nathan's office. It was 9 p.m., but he was waiting for me, a bottle of bourbon on his desk and a stack of papers that looked like a death warrant. Nathan has been my friend since high school. He watched me struggle, watched me sacrifice. He was the one who kept telling me, Carter, get a contract. Carter, protect yourself. I never listened. I thought blood was thicker than ink. Drink, Nathan said, sliding a glass across the mahogany desk. I downed it in one burn. What is it? Did they sue me already? No, Nathan said. He opened a file folder. I was digging into the store's assets. Since you asked me to separate your liability from the business. And I found a filing from 6 months ago. He turned a document around so I could read it. It was a loan agreement, a second mortgage on the commercial property of the store. So, I said, Dad probably needed cash for inventory. Look at the beneficiary, Nathan said. I squinted at the fine print. The loan wasn't for inventory. The funds, $100,000, had been disbursed to a personal account. Joint account, Nathan clarified. Jeffrey and Joyce Ellis. And look at the disbursement date. It was dated 3 days after Brendan failed the bar exam for the second time. They took out $100,000 against the store I saved. I whispered, the realization dawning on me like a slow-moving horror movie. To give to Brendan? It gets worse, Nathan said. I ran a title search on your parents' house. It's leveraged to the hilt. But here's the kicker. They transferred 20% ownership of the hardware store to Brendan last month. I choked on my own breath. What? You don't own any equity, Carter, Nathan said softly. You put in the money, you put in the sweat, but you never signed a partnership agreement. Legally, you were a volunteer, an employee. But Brendan, they gifted him equity. On paper, he's your boss. I sat back in the leather chair, feeling the room spin. They hadn't just used me. They had stolen from me. They had taken the value I created and handed it to the son who did nothing, just so he could look like a business owner for his new in-laws. There's more, Nathan said. He looked hesitant now. I wasn't sure if I should show you this, but considering they just kicked you out. He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. It was a series of photos. Low quality, taken from a distance, probably by a private investigator or just a nosy bystander. It was Brendan. He was in a car. Not the Rolls-Royce, but his BMW. He wasn't alone. There was a woman in the passenger seat. They were kissing. Who is that? I asked. Her name is Jessica, Nathan said. She was the temp secretary at the store last summer. Brendan has been seeing her for 6 months. These photos are from yesterday. Yesterday. 2 days before his wedding to Sarah. Does Sarah know? I asked. I don't think so, Nathan said. But here's the sick part. Your parents know. How do you know that? Because Nathan swiped to the next photo. It was my mother, Joyce, having coffee with Jessica. This was taken last week. Jessica is apparently threatening to blow up the wedding unless she gets a payoff. Your mom is paying her hush money. My stomach turned over. It wasn't just greed. It was moral bankruptcy. They were trapping Sarah, a good, innocent woman, into a marriage with a cheater, just so they could access her family's wealth and prestige. They were willing to destroy her life to save their own image. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city lights. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. This wasn't about a wedding invite anymore. This was a rescue mission. And an execution. Nathan, I said, turning back to him, do we still have the vendor contracts for the wedding? The ones you signed personally? Nathan nodded. Yes, legally you are the sole proprietor of the event. The venue, the catering, the rentals. It's all in your name. And the power of attorney? You had your dad sign a limited POA for the store operations back when he was in the hospital last year, Nathan said. It's technically still valid until revoked in writing. He hasn't revoked it yet, has he? No, I said. He just yelled at me to get out. Good, I said. Draft a document. I want to transfer ownership of the vendor contracts. Transfer to who? To nobody, I said. I want to exercise the cancellation clauses immediately. I want the refund checks issued to me electronically. Tonight. And for the things we can't cancel, I want to redirect them. Redirect. Nathan raised an eyebrow. The flowers, I said. The food. The band. I paid for them. They belong to me. If I can't have a wedding, I'm going to have a donation. Carter, Nathan warned. This is scorched earth. If you do this, there is no going back. They will hate you forever. They already hate me, Nate, I said. They just pretended to love me while my checkbook was open. It's time to close the bank. I pulled out my phone. I had one more text to send. Not to my parents. To Sarah. Carter. Sarah, we need to talk. Before Saturday. Meet me at Nathan's office. Come alone. It was time to light the match. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in a Motel 6 on the outskirts of the county. The sheets were scratchy. The coffee tasted like battery acid, and the air conditioner rattled like a dying engine. But to me, felt like a 5-star resort. Because for the first time in 5 years, I didn't have a to-do list. I didn't have a crisis to manage. I didn't have to fix anything. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. It was 9 a.m. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. I knew exactly what was happening across town. I could visualize it like a movie playing in my head. At the Ellis household, panic was just starting to set in. According to the itinerary I had created, before I torched it, the transportation was scheduled to arrive at 9:30 a.m. Brendan had demanded that specific Rolls-Royce Phantom. He wanted the old English white paint job because he said it matched his teeth. He wanted to be driven through town like a prince, waving to the commoners. At 9:35 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the car rental app. Reservation number 4492. Cancelled. Refund processed to card ending in 8891. I smiled. I took a sip of the terrible coffee. 10 miles away, Brendan was standing in the driveway. He was probably checking his Rolex, a fake one he bought on a trip to Mexico. He would be sweating in his tuxedo, yelling at Mom. Where is it? They're late. This is amateur hour. Mom would be fluttering around him, fixing his boutonniere, telling him, Don't worry, honey. Carter probably just messed up the scheduling. I'll call him. That was when my phone started ringing. First Mom, then Dad, then Brendan. I let it ring. I watched the screen light up with their names, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no anxiety, just a cold, scientific curiosity about how long it would take them to realize the truth. At 10 a.m., the text messages started. Brendan, where is the Rolls? We're going to be late for photos. Pick up the phone. Mom, Carter, the florist just called. They said they aren't coming? There must be a mistake with the card. Call them immediately. Dad, pick up the damn phone, boy. I didn't reply. I simply sent a single email to the group chain. It contained one attachment, a PDF of the cancellation confirmation for every single vendor. The car, the flowers, the band, the catering, the venue. And then I turned my phone off. But I didn't leave you guys hanging. I had eyes on the ground. Nathan, my lawyer and best friend, was essentially my war correspondent. He wasn't invited to the wedding, obviously. but he drove to the Grandview estate to deliver a legal notice. Here is what happened next, exactly as Nathan described it to me. By 1 p.m., the guests began to arrive at Grandview estate. These were heavy hitters. Sarah's father, Senator Newman, had invited half the state legislature. There were judges, CEOs, and old money socialites. They pulled up in their Mercedes and Bentleys, expecting a fairy tale. Instead, they found a locked iron gate. Standing in front of the gate was a security team. But they weren't welcoming guests. They were turning them away. "I'm sorry, folks," the head guard shouted over the confusion. "This event has been canceled by the contract holder." Canceled? The senator stepped out of his car. He wasn't a man used to hearing the word no. "Who canceled it?" "Mr. Carter Ellis?" The guard checked his clipboard. "He terminated the lease on Thursday due to, let me see here, failure of beneficiaries to meet moral and financial obligations." Imagine the murmur that went through that crowd. Just then, my family arrived. Since the Rolls-Royce never showed up, they had to pile into Dad's old SUV and Brendan's cramped BMW. They looked disheveled. Brendan was screaming into his phone. Mom was crying, her mascara running down her face. When they saw the locked gate and the crowd of confused VIPs, Brendan turned white. Not pale, ghost white. He jumped out of the car and ran toward the gate. "Open it. I'm the groom. My brother is insane. He's having a breakdown. We have a contract." The guard didn't budge. "Sir, step back. The owner of the contract revoked access. If you trespass, we will call the sheriff." "I am a lawyer," Brendan screamed, his voice cracking. "I will sue you into oblivion." Actually, a voice cut through the noise. "You're not." It was Nathan. He stepped out of his sedan, carrying a thick briefcase. He walked past the senator, past my sobbing mother, and stood directly in front of Brendan. "Nathan." Brendan blinked. "Thank God. Tell them Carter is off his meds or something." Nathan didn't smile. He opened his briefcase. "Carter is perfectly sane, Brendan. In fact, he's never been clearer." Nathan pulled out a stack of documents. "He asked me to give you this. It's the final accounting of the wedding budget." He handed Brendan a single sheet of paper. It showed a balance of $0. "He withdrew his sponsorship," Nathan announced, loud enough for the senator to hear. "Every dime Carter Ellis put into this wedding, the venue, the food, the music, has been refunded or redirected to charity." "He can't do that," Mom shrieked, grabbing Dad's arm. "He promised. That money belongs to the family." "No, Joyce," Nathan said, turning to her. "That money belonged to the man who earned it. The man you told to vanish because he wasn't good enough to be seen in your photos." The silence that followed was heavy. The guests were watching this drama unfold with wide eyes. This was better than the wedding would have been. But Nathan wasn't done. This was the moment we had planned for. The kill shot. "But that's not the only thing Carter wanted me to deliver," Nathan said. He turned to Sarah, the bride. Sarah was standing by her father's car. She looked stunning in her dress, but her face was confused, scared. "Sarah," Nathan said gently, "Carter wanted you to have these. Before you made a mistake you couldn't undo." He handed her the second manila envelope. Brendan lunged for it. "No, don't look at that." The security guard stepped in, blocking Brendan with a massive arm. "Back off, sir." Sarah opened the envelope. Her hands were shaking. Inside were the bank records, the proof that my parents had taken a second mortgage on the store, a loan of $150,000, and funneled it directly into Brendan's personal account to pay off his gambling debts and hide his unemployment. And underneath that, the photos of Brendan with his mistress, taken 3 days ago. The photos of my mother handing the mistress an envelope of cash to keep quiet until after the wedding. Sarah stared at the photos. She looked at the bank statements showing Brendan was broke, that his successful law practice was a lie fabricated by my parents. She looked up. Her eyes weren't teary anymore. They were furious. "You lied," she whispered. She looked at Brendan. "You told me you made partner. You told me you paid for the honeymoon. Baby, please. Brendan was crying now, actual snot running down his face. It's complicated. Carter is framing me. He's jealous. Sarah turned to my mother. And you knew? You paid that woman? Mom stammered. We were protecting the family, Sarah. Every man makes mistakes. We just wanted you to be happy. Happy? Sarah laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. You wanted my father's connections. You wanted my trust fund. She reached down and took off her shoes, expensive satin heels that she probably couldn't run in. She threw them into the grass. Then, she reached for her left hand. The diamond ring. The one Brendan claimed cost $20,000. I took this to a jeweler last week to get it resized, Sarah said, her voice icy. He told me it was a lab-grown diamond worth maybe $2,000. I didn't want to believe him. I thought he made a mistake. She threw the ring at Brendan. It hit him square in the chest. I guess the only real thing about this wedding was your brother's money, she said. And thank God he took it back. Sarah turned to her father. Daddy, let's go. I want a burger. The senator glared at my father. If you ever contact my daughter again, Jeffrey, I will unleash a legal hellstorm that will make this parking lot look like a picnic. They got in the car and drove off. One by one, the other guests followed. The Mercedes and Bentleys turned around, kicking up dust. In 5 minutes, the parking lot was empty. All that was left was my family. Brendan was on his knees, sobbing into the gravel, searching for the ring. Mom was screaming at Dad to do something. Dad was just standing there, looking old and defeated, staring at the locked gate of the paradise he couldn't afford. Nathan sent me a text at that exact moment. Nathan, it's done. The king is dead. Long live the king. I read that text in my motel room. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would jump up and down. But I didn't. I just felt tired. A deep, heavy exhaustion that went down to my bones. It was the exhaustion of carrying them for so long, and finally putting the weight down. I packed my bag. I walked out to my truck. I threw the key card on the front desk. Checking out already? The clerk asked. Yeah, I said. I have a long drive ahead. I got in my truck. I didn't check the GPS. I just pointed the nose south and drove. The fallout wasn't instantaneous. It was a slow-motion car crash that lasted for weeks. And thanks to technology, I had a front row seat, even from 3 states away. I ended up in a small coastal town in Georgia. I rented a bungalow near the water. I needed the ocean. I needed something vast and loud to drown out the voices in my head. But the voices found me. 3 days after the non-wedding, I finally turned my phone's data back on. It nearly melted in my hand. 74 voicemails. 300 text messages. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the porch to listen to the wreckage. The first voicemail was from Dad, 10 minutes after the guests left. Carter, you ungrateful little bastard. You humiliated us. The senator is threatening to sue. You get back here right now and fix this. You write a check to the venue. You apologize to Sarah. You make this right. He still didn't get it. He still thought he could order me around. The second one was from Mom. An hour later. She was crying. Carter, baby, please. Brendan is suicidal. He's locked himself in his room. We have nothing. The food went to waste. The flowers. Why did you send them to the hospital? That was cruel, Carter. That was our money. Our money. Even in the ashes, she felt entitled to my labor. But the most satisfying and terrifying update came from the community. You see, in a small town, news travels faster than light. And nothing spreads faster than the fall of a perfect family. Mrs. Gable, the neighborhood gossip, had turned her Facebook page into a live news feed of the Ellis family demise. Post 1. Just saw a tow truck at the Ellis house. Taking the BMW. Looks like somebody missed a few payments. Post 2. Police are back. Apparently, Brendan got into a fistfight with a creditor on the front lawn. Very unlawyer-like behavior. I scrolled through the comments. People who used to praise my parents for being pillars of the community were now tearing them apart. I always knew they were fake. They haven't paid their suppliers in months. I heard the older brother, the quiet one, was the one keeping them afloat. Good for him for getting out. It was vindication. But it was also tragic. I watched the reputation my grandfather built over 50 years dissolve in 48 hours because of my brother's ego and my parents' vanity. Then came the legal reality check. Nathan called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. "I'm lying in a hammock," I said. "Try me." "Okay. Here's the damage report," Nathan said, the rustle of papers in the background. "Sarah's family isn't suing for damages, thankfully. They just want to wash their hands of it. But the bank? They are furious." "The loan?" I asked. "Called in," Nathan confirmed. "Since the collateral, the store, is now showing severe insolvency without your capital injections. And since they discovered the loan application contained material misstatements about Brendan's income, they are foreclosing on the store and the house." "They're losing the house?" I felt a sharp pang in my chest. That was the house I grew up in. "They have 30 days to vacate," Nathan said. "Your dad tried to call me. He wanted to know if you would co-sign a refinancing deal. He said, and I quote, 'Carter owes us this.' We raised him." I closed my eyes. The sun was warm on my face. I thought about the years of missed birthdays because I was working. I thought about the help comment. I thought about the Rolls-Royce. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him that his client relationship with you has been terminated," Nathan said, "and that if he contacts you again, I'll file a harassment suit." "Good," I whispered. "There's one more thing," Nathan added. "Brendan. What about him?" "Sarah pressed charges," Nathan said. "Not for the wedding, for the ring. Apparently, he pawned a diamond bracelet of hers last month to pay for his bachelor party. Grand larceny. He was arrested this morning." I sat up. My brother, the golden child, the future senator, was sitting in a county jail cell. "Do you want to bail him out?" Nathan asked. It was a test. I knew it. I thought about it. I really did. I thought about the little brother I used to teach how to catch a baseball. But then I remembered the smirk on his face at Lujardin. "No," I said. "Let him sit there. Maybe he can practice law with his cellmate." The final severance came a week later. I was at a local coffee shop in Savannah, meeting with Mr. Henderson. He was an old client I had helped years ago. He ran a massive shipping logistics firm. "Carter," he shook my hand firmly. "I heard you were available." I didn't believe it. I thought you'd be chained to that family hardware store forever. "I broke the chains," I said. "Well, their loss is my gain." He slid a contract across the table. "Operations director, 6 figures, full benefits, and no family drama." I looked at the contract. It was more money than I had ever made. But more importantly, it was respect. As I signed the paper, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Mom. "Mom, they are taking the furniture today. The neighbors are watching. I have nowhere to go. Brendan is in jail. Dad is having chest pains. You won. Are you happy? You destroyed us. I hope you rot in hell." I looked at the message. The venom was still there. Even with nothing left, she couldn't just say, "I'm sorry." She couldn't take responsibility. It was still my fault. I didn't block her. That would be too easy. Instead, I typed a reply. "Me. I didn't destroy you, Mom. I just stopped saving you. There's a difference. And as for the furniture, maybe you can sleep in the Rolls-Royce." Oh wait, that got canceled too. I hit send. Then I blocked the number. I looked up at Mr. Henderson. "Ready to get to work?" he asked. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. I've never been more ready in my life. I walked out of that coffee shop and into the bright, hot sun of Savannah. I had lost a family, yes, but I had found myself. And looking back on it now, I realized that was the best trade I ever made. It has been exactly 8 months since I drove my truck out of that motel parking lot and headed south. 8 months since I pressed the nuclear button on my family. You might think that after the explosion, there would be silence. You might think the dust would settle and I would just fade into the background. But life doesn't work like that. When you burn down a structure that was rotten to the core, you don't just stand there watching the ashes. You build something new. I arrived in Savannah, Georgia, with nothing but my clothes, my truck, and a terrifying amount of freedom. Mr. Henderson, my new boss, didn't hand me anything on a silver platter. He gave me a desk, a laptop, and a mess of logistics problems that his company hadn't been able to solve in years. I dove in. I worked hard, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't working to pay off someone else's gambling debt. I wasn't working to buy a Rolls-Royce for a brother who hated me. I was working for me. 3 months in, I got my first promotion. Real responsibility. A real title. Director of Operations. Mr. Henderson called me into his office, poured 2 fingers of scotch, and slid a piece of paper across the desk. "You saved us $2 million this quarter, Carter," he said. "This is your new salary." I looked at the number. It was triple what I had made at the family store. It was enough to build a life. It was enough to start a college fund for the kids I hoped to have one day, kids who would never know what it felt like to be the spare child. I bought a house, not a rental, a real house. It's a small, renovated craftsman bungalow near the marshes. It has a wraparound porch, a big oak tree in the front yard, and silence. Beautiful, uninterrupted silence. But the past has a funny way of knocking on your door just when you think you've locked it tight. Last month, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I thought it might be a bill collector for my parents. Nathan, my lawyer, had warned me that creditors might try to harass me, even though I had no legal obligation. But it wasn't a collector. It was Sarah. "Carter?" Her voice was hesitant. "I'm in Savannah. I'm passing through on my way to Florida. Can I buy you a coffee?" We met at a little cafe by the river. When she walked in, she looked different. Lighter. The stress lines around her eyes were gone. She wasn't wearing the designer clothes my mother used to fawn over. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. We sat down, and for a moment, it was awkward. We were 2 survivors of the same shipwreck. "I wanted to thank you," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "I know I said it at the time, but I don't think you realize what you did for me." "I just showed you the truth," I said. "You saved my life," Sarah corrected me. "My dad. He looked into Brendan's finances after the wedding. It was worse than you thought, Carter. Brendan had opened credit cards in my name. He had forged my signature on a car lease application. If I had married him, if I had signed that marriage license, the divorce would have destroyed me. He would have taken half of everything I had." I nodded. I wasn't surprised. "Where is he now?" Sarah took a sip of coffee. "He's out on bail. My dad decided not to press the fraud charges for the credit cards if Brendan agreed to a permanent restraining order. But the ring? The grand larceny charge for the jewelry he stole? The district attorney didn't drop that. He's looking at jail time, Carter. Real time. And my parents? I asked. I hadn't asked about them in months. I had blocked their numbers, their emails, everything. Sarah looked down at the table. They lost the house. The bank foreclosed 2 weeks ago. It was ugly. My dad heard that your father tried to claim squatters' rights. The sheriff had to escort them out. I felt a phantom pain in my chest. That house. The house where I learned to ride a bike. The house where I spent nights in the garage fixing their mistakes. Gone. "Do you know where they are?" I asked. "I heard they moved into a rental apartment on the south side," Sarah said. "It's not a good area. Your mom, she's not taking it well." We talked for an hour. Sarah told me she was going back to school to get her master's degree. She was using the money her parents had saved for the wedding, the part they didn't spend, to invest in herself. When we parted ways, she hugged me. It wasn't romantic. It was the hug of a soldier acknowledging another soldier who made it out of the trenches. "You're a good man, Carter," she said. "Don't let them convince you otherwise." I went back to my quiet house, fed my new cat, Barnaby, a stray I had adopted because he looked as beat up as I felt, and sat on the porch. I thought that was the closure I needed. But the universe had one more test for me. 3 days ago, my Aunt Sylvia called. Sylvia is my mother's sister. She's the spy of the family. The one who plays both sides so she can collect information to trade later. She was the one who sat next to me on the seating chart, remember? The one I used to overhear the truth about the store's equity. Carter, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. It's been so long. We've all been so worried about you. Cut the crap, Sylvia, I said. What do you want? Well, aren't we direct? She huffed. I'm calling because, well, the situation here is desperate, Carter. Your parents, it's heartbreaking. I'm sure it is, I said, leaning back in my chair. Did you call to tell me the weather report? Or is there an ask coming? They're living in a one-bedroom apartment, Sylvia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Joyce says there are roaches. Jeffrey is working as a greeter at Walmart. Can you imagine? A man of his stature? Greeting people. He's earning an honest living, I said. That's more than Brendan ever did. Brendan is struggling, Sylvia continued. He's working at a car wash. He says it's temporary until he gets his license back. But we all know that's never happening. Carter, listen to me. Your father is sick. The stress? His heart. He has insurance, I said coldly. He doesn't, Sylvia said. They let the policy lapse to pay for Brendan's legal defense. Of course. Even now, facing homelessness and health issues, they were prioritizing Brendan. They were burning the furniture to keep the golden child warm. So, what is the point of this call, Sylvia? They need money, Carter, she said. Just a little. To get into a better apartment. To pay for your dad's medication. They know they messed up. Joyce cries every day. She misses you. She misses my checkbook, I corrected. No, she misses her son, Sylvia insisted. Look, Carter, there's something else. The grandfather clock. You know the one? The antique in the hallway? It was supposed to be your inheritance. It's the only thing they managed to save from the foreclosure. They want to sell it. They have a buyer offering $500. But Joyce said, she said she'd rather you have it. For $2,000. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Let me get this straight, I said. They want to sell me my own inheritance? For 4 times what a stranger offered. It's sentimental, Sylvia argued. It's family history. They are giving you a chance to reclaim your legacy. My legacy isn't a clock, Sylvia, I said. My legacy is the fact that I'm the only one in that family who isn't a fraud. You heartless. Do you know what people are saying? Sylvia's voice turned nasty instantly. The mask slipped. They say you stole the wedding money. They say you abandoned your elderly parents. You think you're so high and mighty with your new job and your new house. But you're going to die alone, Carter. Family is everything. Without family, you are nothing. If family is everything, I asked quietly, why did they treat me like nothing when I was the only one holding the roof up? Sylvia went silent. Tell them I don't want the clock, I said. Tell them to sell it. Tell them to sell the pearls. Tell Brendan to sell his fake Rolex. I'm not buying any of it. Not the clock, and not the guilt. You'll regret this, Sylvia hissed. When they die, when there's a funeral, don't you dare show up. You are out of the will. You hear me? You get nothing. Sylvia, I said, looking out at the sunset painting the marsh grass gold. I already got everything I wanted. I got out. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking a little, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying the words out loud to someone who needed to hear them. They were still trying to manipulate me. They were using the concept of inheritance, a mythical pot of gold that never existed, to try and hook me back in. They were using the threat of being excluded from a funeral to control my life. But it didn't work. The hook didn't catch. I walked back inside my house. I looked around at the clean walls, the furniture I had bought with my own money, the absence of screaming and lying. I realized something profound in that moment. For years, I had thought that leaving meant moving out. But leaving isn't physical. Leaving is mental. Leaving is when you stop waiting for them to apologize. Leaving is when you stop hoping they will change. Leaving is when you realize that their tragedy is not your responsibility to fix. I picked up my laptop. I logged into my bank account. I saw the balance. It was healthy. I saw the automatic transfer I had set up for my niece, my cousin's daughter, the only other person in the family I still talk to. I was building a college fund for her because I wanted to be the uncle who helped, not the uncle who enabled. I was breaking the cycle. I poured a glass of water and sat down on the floor next to Barnaby. He purred and head-butted my hand. I was alone in the house, but I wasn't lonely. My parents were together, crammed in that apartment with Brendan and Sylvia and all their secrets and lies. They had each other, and they deserved each other. I had peace, and that was worth more than any inheritance they could ever offer. I am sitting on my porch now as I record this. The sun is setting over the marsh, turning the sky a brilliant shade of purple and orange. Barnaby is asleep on the railing, twitching his tail in some feline dream. It's quiet. Sometimes, in the quiet, I still hear my mother's voice. Your presence would ruin the day. It used to hurt. It used to feel like a knife in my gut. But now it feels like a prophecy that I fulfilled in the best way possible. I did ruin their day. I ruined their illusion. I popped the bubble of narcissism they had been living in for decades. But in ruining their day, I saved my life. I want to talk to you, the person listening to this who feels stuck. Maybe you're the one paying all the bills while your siblings get all the praise. Maybe you're the one who is always too sensitive or too difficult when you try to set a boundary. Maybe you're holding on to a toxic relationship because you're afraid of being alone, or because you're afraid of what people will say if you walk away. I need you to hear me. Biology is not a suicide pact. Sharing DNA with someone does not give them the right to abuse you, use you, or discard you when you're no longer convenient. For 34 years, I thought my value was measured by how much I could endure. I thought love was a transaction. I give money, labor, and silence, and they give me a seat at the table. But that wasn't love. That was rent. And the rent was too damn high. People ask me if I'm sad that I won't be there when my parents pass away. They ask if I worry about the regret. Sylvia mentioned the funeral, trying to scare me. But the truth is, I already grieved them. I grieved the parents I wanted 5 years ago, when I realized they preferred my money to my company. I grieved the brother I wanted when he looked me in the eye and called me the help. The people living in that apartment in Pennsylvania, they are strangers to me. They are characters in a bad movie I finally walked out of. I am building a new family now, not one chosen by blood, but one chosen by respect. I have friends like Sarah, who learned the hard way that truth is better than a diamond ring. I have a boss like Mr. Henderson, who values my work, not my utility. I have a future. I recently started dating someone. Her name is Elena. She's a teacher. When I told her about my family, she didn't tell me to forgive and forget. She didn't tell me, but it's your mom. She took my hand and said, "It sounds like you survived a war. I'm glad you're here." That is what family is supposed to look like. If you are waiting for permission to leave, to cancel the check, to block the number, to drive away, this is it. This is your permission. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. My name is Carter Ellis. I am a son who was told to vanish. So I did. And in the empty space where my family used to be, I found the one thing they could never give me. I found myself. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to make the hard choice to choose yourself over your family, please do one last thing for me. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Goodbye for now.